You have just been shot. The sound is smaller than you expected. Not a cannon. Not a thunderclap. Just a sharp crack outside a hotel in Milwaukee, followed by a hard blow against your chest. For a moment, you remain standing. Your hand moves beneath your coat. Your fingers find a torn shirt, a damaged steel eyeglass case, and the thick pages of the speech folded inside your pocket. Then they find blood. The people around you seize the gunman. Anger spreads through the crowd. Men are ready to tear him apart, but you order them to stop. You want the attacker brought close enough for you to look at him. He is smaller than the danger he has created. You study his face, decide that he is not acting with a clear mind, and tell the police to take him away unharmed. Your companions want a hospital. You want the stage. You test your breathing. There is no blood coming from your mouth. You decide that the bullet has probably missed your lungs. It is not a medical examination. It is a calculation made by a man who has spent his life refusing to let fear make the final decision. A few minutes later, you stand before thousands of people. Your shirt is darkening. The bullet is still inside your chest. You hold up the damaged manuscript and explain that it takes more than a bullet to stop a bull moose. Then you begin to speak. Most people would later remember the courage. Fewer would ask what kind of life creates a person who can be wounded, bleeding, and still believe that the speech must be finished. Today, you are about to experience the life of Theodore Roosevelt. You will begin as a child who cannot breathe. You will lose the people you love most on the same day. You will run from grief into the wilderness, charge into war, fight corruption, enter the White House without expecting it, challenge some of the most powerful corporations in the nation, protect millions of acres of land, divide your own political party, and discover that strength can save a life while ambition can also consume it. By the end, you may admire the force of your will. You may also question the cost of using that force on a country, on a family, and on yourself. Your life begins in New York City in 1858. You are born into comfort. Your family has money, status, servants, and a respected name. From the outside, your childhood appears protected from hardship, but inside your own body, you are never safe. Asthma arrives at night. You wake struggling for air. Your chest tightens. Each breath becomes a negotiation. The adults carry you through dark rooms, open windows, call doctors, and take you into the cold night air because movement sometimes seems to help. You watch other children run without thinking. You learn that something as ordinary as breathing can become a battle. Your weakness shapes your imagination when your body will not let you join the world. Books bring the world to you. You read about animals, explorers, soldiers, distant rivers, and unknown countries. You collect specimens. You examine insects and birds. You try to turn the natural world into something you can understand and control. At 7 years old, you see a dead seal displayed in a market. The animal fascinates you. You return whenever you can and measure its body with the seriousness of a scientist. When you are finally given the skull, primedy, you begin what you proudly call your own museum of natural history. You are not yet strong, but you are intensely alive. Even in childhood, you begin turning observation into performance. You invite cousins and siblings to view your specimens. You label bones, feathers, and insects. You are delighted when adults take your interests seriously, and wounded when they do not. The desire to be useful and the desire to be noticed begin growing together. Your family travels during the years after the Civil War, and the divisions of the country are present inside your own home. Your father is a New Yorker who supported the Union. Your mother comes from a Georgia family with Confederate ties. 2 of her brothers fought for the Confederacy. You love both parents. So the nation is never a simple story of one region containing all virtue and another containing all guilt. Contradiction is present at the dinner table long before it appears in the White House. You also learn that privilege can protect a child from many consequences. Tutors teach you at home. Travel expands your world. Family connections open doors. Your later story will celebrate effort, and your effort is extraordinary. But effort does not begin from the same starting point for everyone. You are born with weak lungs and powerful advantages. Both facts are true. Your father becomes the center of your moral world. He is wealthy, but he does not teach you that wealth makes a person important. He works for hospitals. charities, and children. He expects duty from himself and from you. You adore him so completely that his approval feels like sunlight. One day, he gives you a challenge. You have the mind, he tells you, but you must make your body. The message changes you. You cannot choose the lungs you were born with. You can choose what you do next. A small gymnasium is built in the family home. You lift weights. You pull yourself upward on bars. You box. At first, the work is humiliating. Your effort does not immediately make you powerful. You are still thin. You are still vulnerable. You still lose. During a family trip, two boys torment you. You try to fight back and discover that you cannot even defend yourself. The defeat stays with you. You decide that intelligence without physical courage leaves part of a person unfinished, so you continue. You do not defeat asthma in one dramatic moment. You build strength slowly, painfully, and sometimes stubbornly. This becomes the pattern of your entire life. When reality gives you a limitation, you respond by increasing your effort until effort becomes identity. But there is a danger hidden inside that lesson. If effort can overcome weakness, then weakness begins to look like a moral failure. You will carry that belief into politics, war, fatherhood, and leadership. It will make you inspiring. It will also make you harsh. As a teenager, you travel through Europe and the Middle East with your family. You climb, hike, observe wildlife, and keep detailed notes. You are often awkward with other young people, but you are confident among books and animals. Your eyes are poor, and until you receive glasses, the world is blurred. When clear vision finally arrives, it feels as if nature has suddenly revealed thousands of details that had been hidden from you. At Harvard, you arrive with unusual energy and unusual habits. You study natural history. You box, even though you are not the best boxer. You row, hike, hunt, and fill your days until there is almost no empty space left. Friends, notice that you do not simply participate in life, you attack it. Then the person whose approval matters most begins to die. Your father hides the seriousness of his illness from you. When you finally learn that the situation is grave, you rush home from college. You arrive too late by only a few hours. You are 19 years old. The man you consider the best person you have ever known is gone. And your first response is guilt. You wonder whether you should have understood sooner. You criticize yourself for not being present. Grief does not soften your judgment. It sharpens it against you. You return to Harvard and continue moving. Work, exercise, study, and ambition become ways to keep sorrow from becoming still enough to speak. Your academic interests begin shifting. At first, you imagine a scientific career. You are fascinated by biology and by the new arguments surrounding evolution. But laboratory work requires patience with small details and long periods of quiet repetition. You want ideas to move into action. Politics offers a living organism larger than any specimen jar. You also continue boxing. In one match, an opponent strikes you hard enough to damage your eyesight further. You do not become a champion, but that is not the point. The experience teaches you to continue after embarrassment and to respect an opponent who meets you honestly. You will later prefer open conflict to hidden maneuvering, even when your own political career proves that you are capable of both. Then you meet Alice Hathaway Lee. She is beautiful, warm, and difficult to win. You fall in love with the full force you bring to everything else. You propose. She refuses at first. You continue your courtship with absolute confidence that persistence can change the answer. Eventually, it does. You marry on your 22nd birthday. For a brief time, your future appears beautifully organized. You begin building a home at Oyster Bay. You study law, but find legal education too distant from the action of public life. You enter politics and win election to the New York State Assembly while still in your early 20s. The political world is not elegant. It is filled with party bosses, private deals, patronage, money, and men who consider corruption a normal instrument of government. You arrive wearing expensive clothes and speaking with an upper-class accent. Some dismiss you as a young gentleman playing at reform. Then you begin asking questions. You investigate officials. You challenge powerful interests. You learn the rules quickly and use them aggressively. You discover that public outrage can be a weapon. Newspapers can amplify it, and courage in politics often begins with the willingness to make enemies. You enjoy the fight. In the assembly, you discover that exposing wrongdoing is not enough. A reformer who only denounces corruption may become famous while accomplishing very little. You learn to count votes, build temporary alliances, accept partial victories, and return later for the rest. You begin as a young man eager to announce moral truth. You become a politician able to turn moral energy into procedure. You investigate a powerful judge accused of corruption. The effort initially looks hopeless. Senior politicians warn you that attacking established figures will end your career. You proceed anyway, speak publicly, and force the issue into the newspapers. Even when you do not win every battle, you make it dangerous for other men to assume that nobody will challenge them. This becomes your preferred form of leadership. Find an abuse, name an opponent, dramatize the stakes, and make neutrality uncomfortable. It is effective. It can also reduce complicated disagreements into contests between courage and cowardice. This matters. You care about reform, but you also love conflict. A cause gives you moral purpose. An opponent gives you energy. Throughout your life, you will be at your happiest when both are present. In February of 1884, your first child is born. She is named Alice, after her mother. You should be standing at the beginning of a joyful family life. Instead, the house becomes a place of death. Your mother is ill with typhoid fever. Your wife is failing from a kidney disease made worse by childbirth. You move between rooms, watching the two women at the center of your life disappear. Your mother dies in the early morning. Your wife dies that afternoon. The date is February 14th. In your diary, you draw a large cross and write that the light has gone out of your life. Then you almost erase Alice from your own story. In the autobiography, you will write years later. You will say very little about her. The silence is not proof that she meant little. It suggests the opposite. Some grief becomes easier to carry when it is turned into language. This grief is placed behind a locked door. You leave your infant daughter in the care of your sister and return to politics for a time. But New York feels crowded with memories. You need distance large enough to contain your pain. You go west. The Dakota Badlands do not offer comfort in the usual sense. The land is severe. Winters can kill cattle by the thousands. Summer heat is dry and relentless. The horizon makes human sorrow look small. Not because sorrow is unimportant, but because the world continues without asking permission. You buy ranching interests. You ride for hours. You hunt bison. You chase thieves. You help organize local ranchers. You learn to sleep outdoors and work beside men who do not care about your family name. At first, some cowboys see only a thin Easterner with glasses and careful speech. You know that ridicule cannot be answered with explanation. It must be answered with endurance. During one long chase, thieves steal your boat. You follow them down a freezing river for days, capture them, and then guard them through the wilderness. You refuse to execute them or abandon them. You march them toward the authorities while reading aloud to stay awake. The story becomes part of your legend, but the deeper transformation happens quietly, in the West. You build a version of yourself that feels independent of childhood illness and family privilege. You prove, at least to yourself, that you can live in difficult country among difficult men. You also witness destruction. Bison have nearly vanished. Overgrazing damages the land. Hunters take wildlife as if nature has no limit. The experience helps shape your belief that wilderness must be used, but it must also be protected from complete consumption. Then the winter of 1886 and 1887 destroys much of your cattle investment. Snow, cold, and starvation kill herds across the region. The ranching dream is broken. You return east, but you do not return as the same man. Before your first marriage, you had known Edith Kermit Caro, a childhood friend whose intelligence and steadiness matched your energy. After the years of grief and distance, the two of you grow close again. You marry in London in 1886. Edith becomes the anchor your life requires. She manages the household, understands your moods, raises a large and complicated family, and refuses to be overwhelmed by the force of your personality. Your daughter Alice eventually returns to live with you. You and Edith have 5 more children together. The family home at Sagamore Hill becomes noisy, competitive, affectionate, and exhausting. Children bring animals indoors. They race through rooms. They climb, row, hike, and stage adventures. You are not a distant father. You wrestle, tell stories, organize expeditions, and demand courage. You love your children deeply. But you also expect them to live inside your philosophy of strenuous effort. Your approval can feel like a prize. Your disappointment can feel like a sentence. If you enjoy experiencing history from inside the choices that shaped it, take a moment to subscribe. These stories are not about perfect heroes or simple villains. They are about what ambition gives people, what it takes from them, and what their lives reveal about our own. Your public career continues through a series of roles that appear disconnected but teach you how power actually works. You serve on the United States Civil Service Commission and fight the system that gives government jobs as political rewards. The work is procedural, but the principle is important. You want public service to be treated as duty rather than private property. Then you become a New York City police commissioner. The police department is famous for corruption. Officers accept bribes. Laws are enforced selectively. Political machines expect obedience. You respond by walking the streets at night. You appear without warning at police posts. You find officers sleeping, drinking, or absent. Reporters follow you. Your midnight inspections become public theater. And public theater creates pressure that private memoranda cannot. You also enforce unpopular laws, including Sunday closing rules for saloons. Immigrant and working-class communities accuse you of moral arrogance. Reform looks clear when described from a distance. On the street, it affects real habits, businesses, and cultures. You learn that honest government does not guarantee popular government. Your police years also introduce you to Jacob Riis, a journalist and reformer who documents the brutal conditions in New York tenements. Riis takes you through overcrowded neighborhoods at night. You see families packed into dark rooms, children sleeping beside strangers, workers living without clean air or sanitation. These walks deepen your belief that government cannot call itself neutral when poverty and power are arranged so unequally. But you are still a man of your class and era. You sometimes interpret poverty through character, discipline, and assimilation rather than fully understanding the systems that create it. You want to improve conditions, yet you often expect the poor to become more like the citizens you already admire. Sympathy and paternalism travel together. Your friendship with Riis matters because he shows you that evidence becomes powerful when it has a human face. Statistics may describe suffering. A photograph, a room, and a child's expression can force the public to feel it. You carry that lesson into national politics. You also learn to use attention. You understand that a leader who creates a vivid image can move public opinion faster than a leader who only creates a careful report. You are becoming one of the first modern political personalities in the United States. In 1897, you are appointed Assistant Secretary of the Navy. You believe a great country must be prepared to fight. You study ships, ammunition, logistics, and strategy. You push the Navy toward readiness while many around you prefer caution. When war with Spain becomes likely, you are excited in a way that reveals both conviction and appetite. You believe Spain's rule in Cuba is brutal. You also believe war can test national character and individual courage. When war begins, you resign your office to join it. You help form the first United States Volunteer Cavalry, soon known as the Rough Riders. The regiment includes cowboys, miners, hunters, athletes, and men from elite Eastern families. You are initially Lieutenant Colonel under Leonard Wood. Training is chaotic. Equipment is incomplete. Horses do not all reach Cuba. Disease will become more dangerous than combat. Yet the public imagination is ready for a heroic story, and you are ready to inhabit it. In Cuba, you move toward the fighting with almost reckless enthusiasm. At Kettle Hill and the San Juan Heights, you ride forward while men advance through heat, confusion, and gunfire. The charge becomes the defining image of your early fame. You will remember the exhilaration. Families of the dead will remember something else. This is one of the central contradictions of your life. You understand courage because you seek danger personally. You are not a leader who sends others toward a risk you refuse to face, but your willingness to face danger can make you too willing to accept it for everyone. The Rough Riders return as heroes. Your uniform, glasses, teeth, energy, and language become part of a national character the public can instantly recognize. The story is simplified almost immediately. The popular version makes the charge look like the work of one colorful volunteer regiment and one fearless leader. In reality, regular soldiers, including black troops from the 9th and 10th Cavalry, fight and die in the same campaign. Their role receives far less attention than yours. Fame does not merely remember events. It rearranges them around the person the public most wants to see. You help that process. You write your own account of the Rough Riders with speed and confidence. You understand that if you do not shape the story, someone else will. Throughout your life, you will be both participant and narrator, creating a public Theodore Roosevelt from the raw materials of the private man. You run for governor of New York and win. Party leaders expect gratitude. They helped place you in office. And they expect control. Instead, you support reforms, challenge corporate influence, and refuse to distribute every appointment according to the wishes of the political machine. The party bosses decide that the safest place for you is the vice presidency. At the time, the office offers little power. They believe it will contain you. You fear it may end your political life, but you accept the nomination beside President William McKinley. The ticket wins. Then history removes every plan. In September of 1901, President McKinley is shot in Buffalo. At first, reports suggest he may recover. You leave for the Adirondacks and climb Mount Marcy with your family. A messenger finds you in the mountains. The president is dying. You descend through darkness and rain, racing by wagon over dangerous roads to reach a train. By the time you arrive in Buffalo, William McKinley is dead. You are 42 years old when you take the oath of office. You are the youngest person ever to become President of the United States. There is no election victory to prepare you, no gradual transition. One moment, powerful men believe they have buried you in a ceremonial office. The next, you hold the presidency. You promise continuity, but continuity is not your nature. You believe the president may act unless the Constitution or law clearly forbids the action. Critics believe the opposite, that presidential power should be limited to authority explicitly granted. This disagreement will shape the modern presidency. You call your domestic program the Square Deal. The phrase suggests fairness between labor, business, and the public. You do not want to destroy capitalism. You want to control its excesses before public anger destroys confidence in the entire system. The industrial economy has created astonishing wealth. It has also created corporations large enough to bend markets and governments around themselves. The word trust has become a symbol of concentrated power. You bring a federal case against the Northern Securities Company, a giant railroad combination associated with some of the richest men in the nation. Wall Street is shocked. Business leaders accuse you of attacking success, but you do not oppose every large corporation. You distinguish between what you consider good and bad combinations, the dangerous ones. In your view, use power without accountability. This distinction gives you flexibility. It also gives you enormous personal authority. If government must decide which concentration of power is acceptable, then the character and judgment of government matter more than ever. The Supreme Court orders Northern Securities dissolved. Your reputation as a trust buster grows larger than the actual number of cases your administration brings. Then a coal strike tests whether your idea of fairness can survive winter. Coal miners in Pennsylvania stop working. They want higher pay, shorter hours, and recognition. Mine owners refuse meaningful negotiation. As cold weather approaches, millions of Americans face the possibility of homes, schools, and hospitals without fuel. Previous presidents usually treated labor disputes as private conflicts or sent force against workers. You summon both sides to the White House. The union representatives come prepared to negotiate. The mine owners resist and assume property rights, place them beyond presidential pressure. Their contempt angers you. You consider using federal troops not simply to crush the strike, but to operate the mines in the public interest. The legal authority is uncertain. The threat helps break the deadlock. A commission is formed. The miners return to work. They receive some of what they requested. Though not formal recognition of the union, the deeper change is symbolic. The federal government has not automatically taken the side of ownership. The president has presented himself as a mediator responsible for the public welfare. At this point in your life, what would you trust more? A leader who stays carefully inside tradition, or a leader willing to stretch power during a crisis? Tell us in the comments, because the answer is not as simple as it first appears. Your energy transforms the White House. You box, hike, ride horses, play tennis, read at astonishing speed, and invite people from every part of public life into conversation. You bring your children and their animals into the national residence. The press follows stories of chaos, humor, and motion. The White House becomes a family stage. Your sons run through the building. A pony is reportedly brought upstairs to visit a sick child. Pets include dogs, birds, guinea pigs, snakes, and creatures that appear without warning. You take diplomats and officials on demanding walks that may require climbing, swimming, or forcing a route through obstacles rather than going around them. Participants call these adventures point-to-point walks. For you, even recreation must contain a test. At dinner, buys. You move rapidly from literature to boxing, birds, naval strategy, poetry, ancient history, and politics. You read several books at once and remember enough to challenge experts. Visitors leave exhausted by conversation. Your curiosity is genuine, but it also fills every room. Other people sometimes have to fight for space inside your enthusiasm. Edith protects a measure of order. She limits public access to the children and guards the family's privacy where she can. She understands that the presidency will consume every available part of you unless someone draws boundaries. You understand that the presidency is not only an office, it is a platform. You call it a bully pulpit, meaning a powerful position from which to persuade the country. You speak directly to public opinion and use moral language to turn policy disputes into questions of national character. But moral certainty can become dangerous when it refuses to see its own limits. Your record on race is contradictory and often deeply unjust by modern standards. You invite Booker T. Washington to dinner at the White House, creating outrage among white supremacists and making a symbolic break with custom. Yet you also share many of the racial assumptions common among white political leaders of your era. You fail black soldiers in the Brownsville affair by discharging them without a fair process after a disputed shooting. You support policies and ideas shaped by hierarchy, empire, and beliefs about civilization that deny equality to many people. You speak of courage and citizenship, but the boundaries of who receives full respect in your vision are not equal. The same contradiction appears in your approach to native nations and Western land. You admire selected individuals, cultures, and warriors, but you also support assimilation and expansion policies that continue the destruction of indigenous independence. Conservation protects landscapes from commercial destruction, while federal power still controls land with long histories that did not begin with the United States government. A serious life story cannot remove these facts simply because they make admiration uncomfortable. Your strengths are real. So are the people who pay for your blind spots. In foreign policy, you believe peace is safest when backed by strength. You popularize the idea of speaking softly while carrying a big stick. The phrase sounds restrained, but your definition of national interest is expansive. The construction of a canal across Central America becomes one of your great ambitions. A canal connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans would transform trade and naval power. Colombia controls Panama and rejects the proposed agreement. A Panamanian independence movement rises. The United States positions naval forces in a way that prevents Colombia from easily suppressing the revolt. Panama declares independence, and the new government quickly signs a canal treaty favorable to the United States. You are proud of decisive action. Critics see manipulation and imperial pressure. Years later, you summarize the episode with the claim that you took the canal zone and allowed Congress to debate afterward. The line is memorable because it captures both your appeal and your danger. You despise delay when delay appears to protect cowardice, corruption, or bureaucracy. But democratic procedure is often slow precisely because power should be forced to explain itself before acting. To supporters, you cut through paralysis. To opponents, you turn personal certainty into national policy. Both descriptions contain truth. The canal is a triumph of engineering and a symbol of American power. It is also a reminder that efficiency for a powerful nation may look like coercion to a weaker one. You become the first sitting president to travel outside the United States when you visit the canal zone. Photographs show you operating a steam shovel, turning public works into another vivid image of personal action. Your administration helps mediate the end of the war between Russia and Japan. The achievement earns you the Nobel Peace Prize, yet even your peace is connected to balance, strength, and national advantage. You do not imagine peace as the absence of power. You imagine it as power held in disciplined hands. You build the Navy and send 16 white battleships around the world. The Great White Fleet is a message without a declared war. The United States can move force across oceans, and every major power should notice. At home, you support consumer protection after public outrage over unsafe food and drug practices. Laws strengthen federal inspection and require more honest labeling. The government takes a larger role in protecting ordinary people from dangers they cannot easily investigate themselves. The public demand grows after readers encounter disturbing descriptions of the meatpacking industry. You are skeptical of sensational claims, so you send investigators. Their findings confirm enough abuse to make inaction impossible. The result is not simply cleaner factories. It is a new expectation that national government has a responsibility when private markets hide risks from consumers. You also support railroad regulation. Large rail companies can favor powerful customers with secret rebates while charging smaller businesses more. New laws strengthen the government's ability to review rates. Again, your aim is not to abolish private enterprise. You want rules strong enough to preserve public confidence in it. Your approach angers radicals who believe you protect capitalism and conservatives who believe you threaten it. You often stand between groups that both consider you dangerous for opposite reasons. You enjoy that position because it allows you to see yourself as the defender of the whole nation against every narrow interest. Your greatest long-term passion, however, may be conservation. The child who studied birds and collected specimens has become a president with authority over enormous federal lands. You have seen wildlife disappear. You have seen forests treated as if they are endless. You believe natural resources should support national growth, but you also believe private appetite cannot be allowed to consume the future. You work closely with Gifford Pinchot and other conservationists. You expand national forests, create wildlife refuges, protect national monuments, and add national parks. Through the Antiquities Act, you use presidential authority to protect places such as Devil's Tower and large areas of the Grand Canyon. Business interests accuse you of locking away valuable land. You answer that there are treasures one generation has no right to destroy. Near the end of your presidency, Congress moves to limit your ability to create additional forest reserves in several western states. Before the restriction can take effect, you and your advisors study maps and proclaim millions of additional acres protected. Critics call the action an abuse and mock the new reserves as midnight forests. You accept the insult as evidence that you moved before private interests could close the door. You gather governors, scientists, business leaders, and officials for a national conservation conference. The meeting treats soil, water, forests, minerals, and wildlife not as isolated concerns but as the physical foundation of the country's future. Conservation becomes connected to citizenship. A nation that wastes its land, in your view, is behaving like a person who spends an inheritance and leaves nothing for the next generation. Yet the language of resources can also reduce nature to what it provides humans. Some preservationists want places protected because beauty and wildness possess value beyond use. You often stand between preservation and development, protecting land, while insisting that wise use, not complete separation from human ambition, is the goal. This may be the part of your legacy most visible to people who know little about your politics. Families who stand before canyons, forests, cliffs, and ancient landscapes are living inside decisions made during your presidency. But even conservation carries tension. You value wilderness partly because it produces strength, adventure, and national identity. You often describe nature through hunting and conquest. Protection and domination live beside each other in your imagination. In 1904, you win the presidency in your own right by a large margin on election night. Carried by confidence and perhaps a desire to prove restraint, you announce that you will not seek another term. The statement will trap you later. For now, you enter the height of your power. You are energetic, famous, and politically dominant. You believe leadership means action. You also believe your personal sense of duty can guide action better than hesitation. That belief brings achievement. It also makes retirement almost impossible. You support William Howard Taft as your successor. Taft is intelligent, experienced, and trusted. You expect him to continue your program. He wins the election. And you leave the White House in 1909. You are only 50 years old. A quieter person might write, teach, advise, and enjoy family life. You go to Africa. The expedition is scientific, adventurous, and enormous. You hunt animals for museums, travel through difficult country, and return with stories that strengthen your image as a naturalist and hunter. Modern audiences may struggle with the scale of the killing, even when specimens were collected for scientific institutions. Your conservation ethic never requires you to stop hunting. Instead, you distinguish between controlled use and waste. After Africa, you tour Europe, meet rulers, deliver speeches, and return to the United States as a global celebrity. Then your relationship with Taft begins to collapse. Some of the disagreement is political. Taft is more cautious, more legalistic, and less theatrical. He makes decisions you believe weaken progressive reform. He handles conservation disputes in ways that anger your allies. Some of the conflict is personal. You expected influence without office. Taft expected the freedom to govern. Each man feels betrayed. Your old hunger for battle returns. In 1912, you challenge a sitting president from your own party. You argue that the country needs a new nationalism, stronger regulation, social justice, and government capable of controlling concentrated economic power. You win many Republican primary contests, but party leaders control enough delegates to nominate Taft. You and your supporters leave and create the Progressive Party. When asked about your fitness for the campaign, you say, "You feel as strong as a bull moose." The name follows the movement. The campaign is dramatic, idealistic, and destructive. Progressives call for reforms that will influence American politics for decades. But the split between you and Taft divides Republican voters and makes a Democratic victory far more likely. Then, in Milwaukee, the gunman steps from the crowd. Now you return to the scene where this story began. The bullet passes through your eyeglass case and the folded pages of your speech before entering your chest. The objects slow it enough to save your life. You refuse immediate treatment and speak for more than an hour. The decision is reckless. It is also perfectly consistent. Since childhood, you have treated the body as an instrument the will must command. To leave the stage would feel like allowing weakness to define the moment. The crowd watches a man turn physical danger into political meaning. Afterward, doctors determine that removing the bullet would be more dangerous than leaving it. You carry it for the rest of your life. You survive the shooting, but you lose the election. Woodrow Wilson wins. You finish ahead of Taft, becoming the most successful third-party presidential candidate in American history, but moral victory does not place you back in the White House. The Republican Party is damaged. Your friendship with Taft is shattered. The progressive movement has energy, but no immediate path to executive power. Was the campaign an act of principle, personal ambition, or both? That question follows many powerful people. They often believe their return is necessary because the mission is unfinished. Sometimes they are right about the mission and wrong about their own necessity. If you were Theodore Roosevelt in 1912, would you have challenged Taft, knowing that the division could hand the presidency to Wilson? Share your answer in the comments. The most interesting historical questions are often not about what happened. They are about what we would have done before knowing the result. Defeat does not slow you for long. You travel to South America and join an expedition into the Brazilian interior. The goal is to explore and map a remote river known as the River of Doubt. The journey becomes far more dangerous than expected. Boats are lost in rapids. Food becomes scarce. Insects spread illness. One member of the expedition dies in the water. Another is killed after a conflict within the party. The group struggles through jungle that seems determined to close behind every step. You injure your leg. The wound becomes infected. Fever rises. Your heart weakens, for perhaps the first time. The will that has commanded your body for decades reaches a limit it cannot simply defeat. You become convinced that your condition is endangering everyone. You carry a lethal dose of medicine and consider remaining behind so the others can continue. Your son Kermit refuses to leave you. His loyalty becomes stronger than your desire to control the outcome. The expedition survives, and the river is later named in your honor, but you return physically diminished. The bullet remains in your chest. The tropical illness and infection leave damage from which you never fully recover. The strenuous life has collected its debt. Then Europe enters the First World War. You criticize President Wilson's caution and demand greater military readiness. When the United States finally enters the conflict, you ask permission to raise a volunteer division and go to Europe. The government refuses. Your sons serve. The war also places you in conflict with your own aging. You have spent decades imagining yourself at the front edge of action. Now younger men occupy that place. You write letters filled with advice, pride, worry, and frustration. You want your sons to be brave, but you cannot protect them without contradicting everything you taught them. Edith endures the waiting differently. Her courage is quieter and less celebrated. She watches several sons enter danger while her husband publicly argues for a war that may take them. The strenuous life is not lived only by the person who chooses the arena. It is also lived by the family waiting outside it. Theodore Jr. is wounded. Archie is severely injured. Kermit serves in dangerous conditions. Your youngest son, Quentin, becomes a pilot. In July of 1918, Quentin's aircraft is shot down over France. He is 20 years old. The news reaches you at Sagamore Hill. You have spent a lifetime teaching your children that courage requires risk. That duty may demand sacrifice, and that fear must not rule a person. Now the philosophy returns in its most painful form. You and Edith try to bear the loss privately. You say that there can be no regret for the life Quentin chose, but grief does not obey philosophy. Friends see that the death breaks something in you. This is another uncomfortable question inside your life. You gave your children a powerful inheritance of courage and service. You also gave them a standard that made danger feel like proof of worth. A parent can inspire a child and still burden that child with the weight of expectation. Your health continues to fail. Inflammatory disease, infections, heart trouble, and the consequences of old injuries reduce the body you spent a lifetime building. You still read, write, speak, and argue. You consider another political return. Rest remains almost impossible because stillness has always allowed grief to approach. In January of 1919, you go to sleep at Sagamore Hill. You die during the night at 60 years old. A political ally says that death had to take you sleeping, because if you had been awake, there would have been a fight. The line becomes a perfect ending for the public legend. But a life is larger than its legend. You began as a child desperate for air and became a man who tried to breathe more life into every hour than an ordinary day could hold. You transformed physical vulnerability into discipline. You transformed grief into motion. You transformed office into action and personality into political power. You expanded the role of the presidency. You challenged corporate concentration. You changed the relationship between government, labor, business, consumers, and natural resources. You helped create protections that outlived you. You made conservation a national responsibility rather than a private preference. You also believed deeply in American power, expansion, hierarchy, and your own judgment. Some of your choices strengthened democratic government, others reinforced injustice and empire. Your language of courage could uplift people, but it could also dismiss those whose struggles did not resemble your own. You were never simple enough to fit comfortably inside praise or condemnation. Perhaps the most famous idea associated with you is the image of the person in the arena. The person who acts may fail, but stands apart from the critic who never risks anything. Your own life gives the idea its power. It also reveals what the quotation alone can hide. Entering the arena matters. So does choosing the right arena. Courage matters. So does wisdom. Action matters. So does restraint. A leader should not be judged only by how fearlessly he moves, but by whom his movement protects, whom it harms, and whether he can recognize the difference. Theodore Roosevelt spent his life refusing to be a spectator. When illness limited him, he trained. When grief overwhelmed him, he rode west. When corruption angered him, he attacked it. When power arrived unexpectedly, he expanded it. When retirement came, he rejected it. When a bullet entered his chest, he finished the speech. That intensity made him unforgettable. It did not make him infallible. After living through his life, what remains with you most strongly? Is it the sickly child who built his body? The grieving young husband who disappeared into the Badlands? The reformer walking the streets at night? The soldier charging uphill? The president protecting forests and confronting corporations? The imperialist convinced that power justified intervention? The father who taught courage and then lost a son to war? Or the wounded candidate standing before a crowd because he believed stopping was worse than bleeding? Tell us in the comments whether Theodore Roosevelt's greatest strength was also his greatest weakness. If this story gave you a different view of history, give the video a like so more people can experience it. Subscribe to Live Through the Choices, Victories, Contradictions, and Consequences of History's Most Extraordinary People. Your next life begins soon.